Let me ask you about one of Iraq's neighbors, Iran. When you were up in the north, one of the things you had to deal with, and even during the surge, was Iranian forces, Quds forces, in many ways fomenting the violence in Iraq, either by supplying weapons or arms, militias, all kinds of things. Apparently, these security services are now, the Quds force is now spending a lot more of its time worrying about what's going on in Iran, trying to put down the opposition movements there. Has that changed the political dynamic in Iraq? Are you finding that the Iranians have, in a sense, packed up and gone home?
Well, first, I think you're absolutely right to say that the security elements in Iran, particularly the Revolutionary Guards Corps, the Quds Force, and the Basij, the militia, have had to focus a great deal more on internal security challenges than they did in the past. And indeed, I think you've heard it said by pundits that Iran has gone from being a theocracy to a thugocracy, that it has, frankly, become much more of a police state than it ever was in the past since the revolution. And that is, again, because of the emergence of this reform movement of the citizens who were outraged at the hijacking of the election that took place back last summer.
Do you think Ahmed Chalabi is an agent of Iran or influenced by Iran or carrying out an Iranian agenda in Iraq?
Well, I think, again, this is less about what we think. This is about what Iraqi leaders think. And Iraqi leaders have obviously not been overly pleased with some of the political high drama that has been fomented by the Accountability and Justice Committee, which has been orchestrated, indeed, by Dr. Chalabi. And again,
that committee was behind this renewed de-Baathification and this attempt to disbar a whole set of people from running.
Yes, I mean, indeed. They announced the list. They determined who was on it. They had a key role in the adjudication of it later as appeals were issued and so forth. So, and that did indeed, especially coming so close to the actual elections, caused quite a bit of political turmoil. They've worked through it. The fact is there are tens of thousands of candidates, of which several hundred now in the end will have been disqualified. As with everything in Iraq, there's, again, with Irocracy, as we have termed it at times, there's often a considerable degree of emotion. There is, again, drama. But at the end of the day, or perhaps sometimes a little after the end of the day, they managed to work through it. And as always, it has required, again, what I talked about earlier, these cross-sectarian, cross-ethnic coalitions and deals, which is okay. That's a good development for Iraq, frankly. We used to say when I was there, it's you can shout, but please don't shoot. And shouting is, I think, a very acceptable alternative to shooting.
Do you think that the Iranian regime has made a decision that they are going to try to get a nuclear weapon, or do you think it is still unclear whether they want a robust nuclear civilian capacity and a robust missile capacity, but they haven't yet decided whether they will join the two?
I think it's something slightly different, actually. I think, first of all, that there can be a debate about whether or not the final decision has made. I think, in fact, probably that final decision has not been made by the Supreme Leader, and that will be his decision to take. But that's a little bit immaterial at this point in time, because all of the components of a program to produce nuclear weapons, to produce the delivery means, and all the rest of that, all of these components have been proceeding as if they want to be in a position where he can make that decision, having reached the so-called threshold capability. And that is, of course, what is so worrisome to the countries in the region, and, of course, above all, to Israel, and obviously to the United States and the countries of the West that are now transitioning, of course, from what was the diplomacy track for about a year, where everyone made every good faith effort, extended the open hand, and it was not met with an open hand. It was met with intransigence and obfuscation and evasion. And now the result is the transition by not just the United States, but with France, with the UK, even Russia now, all seeing the need to transition to the so-called pressure track, which would include much stiffer sanctions and so forth.
Don't you have the beginning of a very robust containment strategy, though? And you would be the one actually who would probably be principally charged with the military operationalization of this. You have the Gulf states, the Sunni states, Egypt, Israel, the major European countries, perhaps even Russia, all arrayed, along this common interest that Iran not become a nuclear power. Wouldn't it be possible to contain it?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to ask a country that is most directly concerned about this, and that would be Israel. And at the end of the day, what we might want, with a slightly detached perspective and the other Western countries, what the Gulf states and others might be willing to accept. And by the way, there is no uniform or universal acceptance of what you have just laid out. In fact, it's quite the contrary in many of the countries, and there's quite a mix.
Meaning what? What they want the United States to strike?
Well, there are some that are very, 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 very concerned about the developments in Iran and find that very difficult.
They want the United States to strike?
Well, it's interesting. I think there is almost a slight degree of bipolarity there at times. On the one hand, there are countries that would like to see a strike, us or perhaps Israel even, and then there's the worry that someone will strike, and then there's also the worry that someone will not strike. And again, reconciling that is one of the challenges of operating in the region right now. Our job right now is to ensure that we're prepared for any contingencies, that we can support, indeed, with the diplomatic efforts to transition now to the pressure track and so forth. And that's indeed what we're endeavoring to do with our partners, who, by the way, find that President Ahmadinejad is often our best recruiting officer, because his actions, his rhetoric, and the other activities of Iran, in many cases, are causing much more embrace of CENTCOM and other activities than otherwise would be the case.